The first question I had was, in all your years of studying and teaching entrepreneurship, what do you think is the most misunderstood part of the topic?
So the most misunderstood part, Ishan, is how you just simply believe that the passion will lead to something wonderful. Look, in entrepreneurship, it's all about finding the right problem. It is not just about blindly following a passion. The passion has to align with somebody's problem, the world's problem, or somebody should be willing to pay for it. So many students come to me and tell me, we are very passionate about baking, we're very passionate about the environment, we're very passionate about something. But how do you translate that passion into solving a problem? Because until you solve problems, people are not going to pay for them. Entrepreneurship is taking that passion to a level where people are willing to put a price to your innovation. People are willing to put a price to what you bring to the world. That is where there's value for a customer. You make a customer based on solving somebody's problem. People don't understand this. They believe that the passion itself will become their entrepreneurial venture. That that journey of transitioning from passion to a problem statement is very, very critical. And often that becomes the most misunderstood part of a wannabe entrepreneur. The wannabe entrepreneur says, I'm so passionate, but I'm not able to make that into a venture. And that's where the missing link is. So I started my career with IBM. And one of the things that I was doing as a part of the team there was to actually driving a lot of the M&A deals. So as a part of the HR vertical, we were trying to integrate many organizations. And that's where I saw a lot of entrepreneurial passion coming from people who were actually, on the other side of the table. So that's when I decided that, this is something I wanted to do. I, explored ideas, found a business partner who I wanted to start up with. And we really started out creating an organization which helps people build strategy, build people solutions. So it was a very niche consulting organization. It was also a time where India was looking at a global market. So it was a time where a lot of small and medium enterprises were looking at exporting. So we got ourselves trained into how to help companies strategize in exports. And that was a big part of what we did. But more than that, it was really about working with people with a lot of family run organizations. So I helped them create strategy for the next generation. I helped them work on how the growth models are going to be. And that was really my work with the entrepreneurs, trying to help them become successful and so on. A big part of what I did was also corporate training. So Ishan, you sit in boardrooms and you do a lot of training, getting them to believe that their strategy is going to work, their models are going to give them the right results and so on. It was there that I realized that I really enjoyed this part. So from corporate training, I spent a lot of time into doing some experiments with classroom training. And that's when IIT Delhi actually invited me to do a course. And I loved that so much that I started spending more and more time in the classroom. And that was also my journey where I transitioned from the boardroom to the classroom, so to say. And I decided to become a full-time academic, working with students and helping them find their passion and converting their passion into a problem statement, like I said, and then creating ventures out of it.
Wow, wow. Okay. I mean, I was going to ask you about the PhD as well, about how this sort of influenced that journey. I think we got that. So I would assume it's a very different experience studying something as opposed to entrepreneurship, which is actually like, getting your hands dirty and so on. And so what is that like? What is that journey like where you actually dove into the subject to try and understand how take us into your PhD?
Yeah. So that's an interesting question, Ishan. You have to realize that the academic world is much more than just experience sharing. So a lot of people come to us at the Center for Entrepreneurship, for example, and they come and say, hey, you know what? I have so many years of experience. Let me just come and share my journey, my stories, etc. The academic world actually requires you to validate these stories, these sort of, as we call them, war stories of being out there in the trenches with the depth of academic rigor. And when I say academic rigor, there are a lot of theories, a lot of frameworks. So when you're in a classroom, you're actually not just doing storytelling, but you're wrapping all of that around with a lot of literature, a lot of researched and evidence based information that the students really enjoy and deserve to know, because it's those nuggets that are then applicable in various different environments. And that is what pushed me to do my PhD. So my PhD was from IIT Delhi, from the Department of Management Studies. And what I explored was during my PhD was how ecosystems of entrepreneurship across the country have proliferated, what has worked for them. And we focus specially on the technology and business incubators, which are hosted in different universities. So it was an interesting study to understand this whole ecosystem. But whenever you pick a PhD topic, you end up doing a deep dive in that one area. What it does is that it helps you cultivate a research mindset. It helps you understand how research works and how research needs to be brought into the classroom. That is the key part of a PhD. And that's why universities across the world actually value a PhD in the academic world, because it really pushes you to think as a knowledge creator and not just a knowledge consumer.
Wow. Wow. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I now look at the entrepreneurship department at Ashoka, which is definitely my favorite department, I think I see that sort of translate in the way you try to get students to think. And so I'm curious as to what the thinking was behind setting up a center, because I mean you're really going in blind and you're really creating this one of a kind place. And so take us into that journey.
Yeah. So, Ishan, the idea behind setting up the Center for Entrepreneurship was, especially in a liberal arts university, is to actually infuse the spirit of creation along with the spirit of being deep thinkers and writers. So, hats off to the founders where they had this vision that, we just don't want to create people who will be academically sound and will be, great sort of analysts of literature, but they'll also be able to create. And I say, would take pride in saying that we were amongst the first few university based structured ecosystems where entrepreneurship was taught to students of liberal arts. So a student of English, a student of philosophy, a student of sociology is actually studying the principles of creating a venture, creating a business. And that created a very different genre of entrepreneurs. Let me also tell you one thing, Ishan. Entrepreneurship is often seen as just startups. Entrepreneurship is seen as business. It's always seen as, in many classrooms, it's called the seeds of capitalism. We changed that mindset a little bit. We said we have to cultivate a culture of entrepreneurship. We have to create a mindset of entrepreneurship. And that was the core purpose of the center, to think like an entrepreneur, to be a problem solver. That is something which is required in every job that you do. So whether you are going to become the CEO of a company, whether you're going to create your own company, whether you're going to work with the government, whether you're going to work with the non-profit sector, whether you're going to work with an organization like the World Bank, or you choose to just manage your home, you will need to have an entrepreneurial mindset. You will need to have a mindset that helps you solve problems. That is the core of what we are delivering at the CFE. Create an entrepreneurial perspective in everything that you do. And it is a life skill. It's a life skill that one has to inculcate over a period of time. And you've done enough courses at the Center for Entrepreneurship to realize that it is not about venture creation only. Yes, venture creation is a very important part of what we are delivering, but what we are really, really focusing on is your ability to be an entrepreneur everywhere. You are a great example of that, because you've taken that whole passion of love for wildlife into being entrepreneurial about it, creating a book around it, doing a lot of talks around it, inspiring so many people about it. So that's the entrepreneurial mindset. And now the next level will be how you can create a venture around it, how it becomes something where you're taking your passion into solving somebody's problem and then using it to actually generate value for yourself and for the people around. So you see that journey, that is what we are trying to inculcate as a mindset in everybody who comes and works with us at the Center for Entrepreneurship. Now, one very important part of what we also do is to create a buzz and a culture on campus. And that's something where, everybody is chatting about some gossip on campus. So while they're discussing who's going out with whom, they're also talking about what's the next big venture, what's the next technology that they can work on, how can they be creative, how can they think of, fun stuff that the world of entrepreneurship and the world of, ventures will actually value. And many students come, create ventures, get funded. So there's a lot of unlocking of, as I say, value which happens there. There's a lot of money creation that happens. And we also focus on creating responsible entrepreneurs, right? So one question which we ask to every student who actually gets incubated with us is that what is that social element that you will bring through your startup? How will society be slightly better than what it is based on the startup that we are going to support for you? And that really pushes an entrepreneur to start thinking of their social responsibility from day one. Remember, we are a student startup ecosystem. So every student is made to think on what their social responsibility is. And social responsibility starts today. It's not when they become profitable, it's not when they go public, it's not when they make a lot of money and they say, okay, now we'll put money into philanthropy. Be responsible for the ecosystem, the society, the environment around you from today. And that's another very important element of creating this liberal arts entrepreneurs at the Center for Entrepreneurship in Ashoka.
I think there's just so much there to unpack. I totally think what I love about the center is that it's really topic agnostic. You can be passionate about anything and use an entrepreneurial mindset to fuel that. I think the listener should know about this one instance. For example, I think it was on social media where I saw the entrepreneurship department send out a flyer saying, if anyone on campus is working on an interesting project, come to us and we'll help incubate it. And I think I really respect that. I respect this mindset of trying to fuel that, especially because you don't even know what the project is, but I there can be an entrepreneurial seed to be sown in their end. And I think that speaks to the beauty of the center. I want to dive a little deeper into what you just said, this idea of cultivating the mindset. Could you take us into a course or two where you try to get students to think entrepreneurially? Because I think anyone can benefit from that. That's what we discussed, right? How does it translate into the courses? For example, I think I think in your course in creativity and design thinking, putting us in touch with an actual company and getting us to solve a certain problem for them, or at least ideate about it, is one way that sort of got those gears turning. And so I'm curious as to how you think about that while designing the curriculum.
Yeah. So it starts in very different ways, Ishan. The first step is your exploration with the problem. So if you remember, the first step that we do in our classroom is to say, go find a problem around you. And let's focus on defining that problem. Let's focus on saying, how does that problem or how does that situation become a problem? Why does it need to be solved? And whose life is going to be better because the problem gets solved? That is a very important part of understanding the whole journey of this whole entrepreneurship mindset. That are you being a creator or are you being a complainer? And that's something that we spoke about, remember, in the class and so towards the end, that you can crib and complain about it or you can be a creator. So that is the core message that we give through all our conversations. Once they start understanding that this is the problem, how a problem needs to be defined, how it's to be seen, then we start getting into various ideation techniques on how the problem can be looked at and solved and so on. From a design thinking perspective, we change the perspective even more. We bring in the whole element of empathy, where we say, go and observe and understand and unpack what the user really wants. That's where we also say, go ahead and understand how the user is interacting with the product. Remember, I'm using the word user, not the customer, because we are creating products for humans and how they interact with products and services and experiences. That is a core of design thinking. It's human-centered design that we bring in into the classroom. A lot of students actually go through this process of empathy through various problem statements that different companies have given them or what we've given them as a part of case studies. And it's a transformative experience for them to see how empathy can give insights which they have never imagined. That's a very, very important part of what you believe is the problem versus what the customer or the user is seeing as the problem. One core element that we bring about in our conversations is do not assume. In fact, we say challenge that assumption of how you think a solution should be. So that becomes an important aspect of understanding this whole process and journey of cultivating an entrepreneurial mindset. We of course use various other techniques of case studies, of live problem solving. There are lots of blogs that we brought into the class. One very interesting story that we talked about was how different actors in Bollywood are selling their products. So there are different actresses who now own brands and they're now selling products, and why some of them are doing better than the others. So that becomes a process of empathy. Ishan, the purpose of education today is to connect with the world outside, almost real time as it's unfolding and unpacking. Remember, we can't fall back on historical case studies because the context has changed so much and it's changing every day with new tools out there in the market, with new capabilities of the existing tools that are there. That you need to give them contemporary stories. And when I say contemporary, literally, it has to be here and now, that students want to analyze and work on and experience and so on. And that's a very important part of modern education, especially management education and entrepreneurship education, because we can't rely on what has worked in the past. It's not going to work in the future because the context is changing so much. And that's an important part of understanding. One other part that we really focus on is this whole element of AI into the classroom. So, for example, one exercise that we do is to learn how to build prototypes. And till now, we were telling them to build prototypes and not use technology. But now we are telling the class to use AI to build those prototypes and to show us multiple prototypes based on their ability to use the AI tools, so that the class can see how different options can get created and study and analyze each of those prototypes. All we tell the class is come and share the prompt with us so that we can learn how to prompt and how to get the best output in developing these prototypes. So now the whole model has changed into getting them to use the tools more effectively and then generate multiple ideas, multiple options, and take more informed and better decisions using these tools instead of saying, hey, do not bring in the technology into class.
I'm just like, I've taken back to that, to an example that you had said in class about human-centered design, where this company was trying to ideate for toothbrushes for children, but they weren't really thinking about the children who are actually going to be holding it in their hands and brushing. And then only once they looked at them, they realized that they needed to adjust the length accordingly so that it doesn't hit the gums. And I think that that's such a beautiful example because it speaks to empathizing with the user, the person who's actually going to use the product. And so, I
Absolutely.
mean, that's
Absolutely. And we often get that wrong, Ishan. That becomes a big point of contention. We get that wrong. We believe that our product is a great product, whereas the user is having a very different experience interacting with that product or service or experience.
I think it all starts with leading with empathy. I remember in class how many times you stressed on that word, and that's uh, I think this is why. That's great. I would love to know how you went about then writing this book, your bestseller, Leapfrog. What is the? I mean, I really enjoyed the book, and I'm sure the listeners will. Can you take us into the story behind what it took to write this?
Yeah. So, Professor Mukesh Sood from IIM Ahmedabad and we've been teaching together now for about 7, 8 years. And we were actually just debating on how do we take our classrooms and our stories to many more people. These are sort of rich, exciting stories that our students have loved. They've benefited from it. They've really sort of applied them in their journey. But our classrooms both at IIM Ahmedabad and at Ashoka are fairly selective. So it limits the number of people who can get access to these classrooms. And the objective was to write the journey and stories of what we teach in class so that many more people can access it. So that was the first core objective. The second objective was something I spoke about right in the beginning, Ishan, which is all our stories are wrapped in some form of research. These research models are not easy to read. So if you start reading a research paper today, Ishan, you'll go to sleep because the way it's written is a lot of research language. It's a lot of technical jargon. We've actually used almost 300 research data points in this book and created them into stories that become usable and readable by many, many more people. So we are kind of bridging that gap between what research writing um, is relevant to our area of expertise is and how students can consume that research. So that has become the second objective. And really, the idea is to get the word out there. So we enjoyed the process of writing. We sort of brought about many interesting nuggets from students like you who've done well in class, who've really shown the path to many others, and brought out what it takes to be successful, to thrive, to leapfrog, and be a champion of change. So those are the core elements of what Leapfrog is. It's about 6 practices that will help you become better in your career, better in your life, and hopefully more efficient in the way you want to bring about change, including a big focus on how you build and cultivate this whole mindset of entrepreneurship. It also gives a little bit of tools, actually, Ishan. So if you look at the last chapter, it's called the personal journey map. So it's not just Gyan, but it's also a toolkit to help you navigate what you want to do. So it helps you chart your path. It's based on the lean startup model. But the personal journey map is the startup of you. If you imagine yourself to be a startup, then how do you navigate using the same frameworks that startups use? And that's what we've done in the personal journey map.
Fantastic. I would love for you to break down the title itself, because I think that's one of the most interesting things, apart from of course the actual content. But I think what made me grab this off the shelf before I even realized that you were a professor at Ashoka. This is before I joined the department and so on.
Yeah.
Uh, I think that it's a very interesting title. So could you break that down for those who don't know what leapfrogging means?
So leapfrog means that you are moving beyond your competitors and jumping multiple steps to a place that you want to be. This is a theory which is there in organizations. So organizations leapfrog and do not go through the paths that historically their competitors have gone through. It's a well established theory. The same theory and principle can be applied to careers and people. So how do you move beyond your initial position, leaving behind people who are at a similar place into a much better place that you want to be, faster, better, more efficiently? That is the core of Leapfrog. And once you get there, how do you thrive? So, two key words to take away from the title is to leapfrog and to thrive. And when you're able to thrive, you're able to put in your best. You bring in, it's a little bit of success attracts success. So you are able to really thrive in that place that you decided to be. So that's the purpose of the title. And to get there, there are 6 practices. So once you follow those 6 practices, you imbibe them, you learn them. Each of these practices is supported by different pillars. So if you want to build, so let's say grit is one of the practice. Curation is one of the practices that we talked about. Intellectual humility is a practice. If you want to build these practices, what are the pillars that you need to strengthen to get to this level? That's what we've talked about in the book.
Yeah, I've read the book a few times now, and I think the concept I always return to is grit. I think that's the one that resonated with me the most. Of course, I'm really a fan of Angela Duckworth's work. I reread her book every few months. Could you take us into like the nitty-gritties of how to actually build a gritty mindset? I think everyone will benefit from being able to just but I think a lot of people will benefit from being gritty, but I don't think they really understand what it means. And so could you break that up, please?
So, Ishan, grit in very, very simple terms means passion and perseverance sustained over a period of time, which means that you are able to keep your interest and your passion for what you believe is the path going for a period of time without getting distracted. You're willing to put in the hours, and you don't believe that magic happens without hard work. And that's the reality. If you look at data, if you look at research, everybody who you believe was gifted actually has put in many thousands of hours behind it. It's like a duck swimming. When the duck is floating on water, it's the most pretty sight. But nobody sees the amount of effort that the duck is putting in below the water. And that is where grit comes in. One big element of developing grit is your ability to deal with boredom. We often believe that everything should be exciting and entertaining at all points of time. It never happens. And that is where passion starts failing, because you start getting bored. You don't want, your interest starts falling, then you don't want to follow that pursuit. So, let's talk about learning music or learning an instrument. It's very exciting in the beginning, then you learn a few things, then you play a few times in front of your friends, and everybody says, oh wow, you're a great musician. And then when you start spending more time in it, you realize, oh, it's more complex than you thought. And that's when you say, hey, you know what, I don't need to take this on anymore. You're not willing to put in those hours. Why? Because you're getting bored. People who are successful learn to deal with this boredom. It happens to every sports person. People who are playing cricket, it's IPL season, so I want to give a cricket example. People who are playing cricket out there in the sun are playing for hours and hours and hours. You think they're enjoying every moment of that time practicing? They're also getting bored. But that is what differentiates a person from average player to a good player to a world-class player. If you want to be world-class, remember boredom is a part of your journey. Figure out how you want to make that boring moment interesting. There are various ways you can entertain yourself, but most importantly, start with accepting that boredom is going to be an important part of your becoming world class. Look at your passion for wildlife. Not every moment out there in the jungle is going to give you excitement, right? There are moments where you're sitting there just waiting and waiting and waiting for one photograph. And that's the boring moment. That is the moment that has made you and brought you to the position that you're in today. And remember, as you go forward, Ishan, you will continue to experience boredom in whatever passion you have. But if you figure out how you want to deal with it, you will differentiate yourself from others who are also trying to be amateur wildlife photographers and conservationists and writers and so on. So that is my little story and journey that I want every of your listener to follow and to believe is important, because that's the core of developing grit and living with that passion that makes you successful.
With a concept like grit, I think that it's very easy for people to sort of deceive themselves into thinking they're very gritty, or rather, even conversely, maybe convincing themselves they're not gritty enough when they actually are. And so, what is an honest way that we can assess our own grit levels? I think that is something we should all learn.
Well, we've given a test in the book. So you can actually you can score yourselves based on certain questions, and you'll get a grit score. And, this is a very internal test. So don't try to fool yourself when you're answering a question on where you are grading yourself on grit. But an important part is that you get a fair assessment of where you are. Look, there has been enough and more material that is proven out there that people with grit, people who demonstrate grit, who build grit, are more successful in life. This is not us saying based on our anecdotal evidence in classrooms, but this is a well documented research that Angela Duckworth, at the name that you mentioned, has actually done. And it's been used by organizations across the world. The US Army is using it today to do recruitment, to promote their people. So there is a lot of scientific evidence around it on believing and developing and growing your grit. So if you're serious about it, build it, work on it, and of course, make sure that you are figuring out how you want to sustain your interest through the moments of boredom.
Well, I think this has really been a fascinating conversation. Maybe we need to record one again for just to go into your course, creativity and design thinking. I think there's a lot of material there. There's just one closing question that we have on this podcast um, where I'm going to ask you to think of a message. Okay, say hypothetically you had access to billboards all across the world for a day, just for a day. What is the one message you would put there out there for the world?
Lovely question, Ishan. What a way to close. What I would say is work on ideas that make the world a better place, solve problems of the world. As entrepreneurs, as people with entrepreneurial mindset, people who want to make a difference, create the world a better place. And there is a lot of hope in this generation, in your peers, because they come with a passion, they come with a will to do, and they need to find problems that are worth solving. They solve those problems, they'll be able to create magic in the world. So my billboard message will be, find problems worth solving for the world.
So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Ishan. I wish you all the best. You've done a phenomenal job with your book. It's a great inspiration for students, for many generations of students at your age to actually learn and get inspired with, and phenomenal work. I want to congratulate you for graduating, for the phenomenal work and contributions that you've done at Ashoka. So thank you so much for everything that you've done, and Godspeed, more power to you.